Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the HCW YouTube channel. And today is another UK Indie Spotlight. And we've got a man on which we've only done like two of these, but I'm really looking forward to this interview. We've got good old K Jutler on. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. It's nice to have someone to speak to who's a Kamikaze alum,
Yeah,
effectively, isn't it?
yeah, definitely. I've sold your merch, so it's kind of like when you're on the when I was on the table there.
Exactly. You've done your job. That's the key thing. Get out there, do your spots, and sell your merch. And you've
Yeah.
done half of that for me. So.
Yeah, so how the tables have turned, kind of. Yeah, but yeah, so as discussing before the video, this is kind of like this is your life thing. I've tried to do some research. Some of it probably is wrong, and we'll go from there. And you can debunk anything that I've got wrong here.
That's absolutely fine. No problem at all.
Oh, awesome. So how did you? What's like the first memory of your kind of like when you started to enjoy wrestling? Like your first wrestling memory?
Oh my God, my first wrestling memory is like my first memory. So my dad was an absolutely huge wrestling fan, and he
Yeah.
had tickets to see the then WWF come to the UK for the first time in 1989.
Yeah.
And it was not for the first time, but you know what I mean? Like the first time he was going to get an opportunity to see them live. And it was especially important for him because he was going to get to see Hulk Hogan perform live. All right. And that was in October of 1989. And I had the arrogance and the temerity to decide to be born that day, so he missed the show. So I've had, not necessarily wrestling in my blood because my dad was never a wrestler, but I have had wrestling involved since before I could talk. Me and my dad would watch the wrestling. I'd sit on his knee while we were watching, the old WWF. And I can't remember a time when wrestling wasn't in my life because it was always there right from the get-go.
Okay, it sounds like your story already is that you had to become a wrestler because you ruined your dad's Hulk Hogan memory. That's what it is.
I apologise to my dad like the entire career. It's just one giant apology to my father.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And then so was it mainly WF like when you were younger what you were watching, or is it like WCW at that point?
I mean, when I was a kid, 1997, 1998, I was in primary school, and the big rivalry between the WWF and the WCW. Oh my God, some of my all-time favorite matches were all the cruiserweight matches with Chris Jericho, Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, and so on, Juventud Guerrero, all of that. Just the amazing stuff that we got to see in that like sort of undercard on WCW. It was never given the appreciation that people should have given it. Do you know what I mean? It was always considered like the extra circus attraction because the main stars were obviously the NWO, Hulk Hogan, and all the rest. But I always felt like, especially Chris Jericho, he really stuck out for me more than probably most of the top stars. Obviously, I was a kid. I loved Goldberg. Goldberg was the megastar. He was the monster that was been machining through everyone. Of course, I was like wrapped up in that excitement. But it was Chris Jericho that really stood out to me when I was a kid, just because he was so charismatic and funny and entertaining. So it wasn't just the WWF. It was definitely WCW as well. But it was only a section of WCW that caught my eye, whereas WWF was always the main show, effectively.
Yeah, like the big and live characters WWE wasn't, whereas like I said, the cruiserweights, I love the cruiserweights in WCW.
Yeah, I mean they did say one of the criticisms they had with WCW was that they never created their own stars. And I don't think that's really true because, I mean, they created DDP, they created Goldberg, Booker T was a star before, but he was a big star because of WCW.
Yeah, definitely.
And a lot of people like Chris Jericho, who got his start in Mexico, and a lot of the other Mexican wrestlers and stuff. Yeah, obviously they were big in Mexico and they had their own success in Japan as well. But the American audience didn't really see that. I don't think they became the superstars, for lack of a better expression. That word is probably used too much these days in wrestling, but they never became the superstars without WCW. I think WCW at least gave them the platform to show the world, how good they were, and that's one of the reasons why Chris Jericho ascended to the heights he did. He did very well in Japan, but if he stayed in Japan or if he stayed in Mexico, would WWE at the time have ever picked him up and given him the career he's had. Would he have got there without WCW? I don't know. So I do think it's a bit unfair that they say WCW didn't create any stars. They only stole stars from WWF. I think that's probably a bit unfair. They did definitely create some stars.
Yeah, it's because people focus on more of like your Macho Mans and your Kevin Nashes and your Hulk Hogan, so they think of that. But yeah, obviously Chris Jericho, like Booker T was big, but like Harlem Heat and then onwards, WCW made him. So that's definitely a great point there. And then, so obviously you started. Obviously, you were into wrestling. When did you start training? When did you suddenly decide I could do this?
So it would have been 2000 and would have been 2004, would it? Yeah, I was 14.
Mm.
I was 14 when I started training, and I started training at a training company called 4FW, Forefront Wrestling, and they were based in Swindon, which is convenient because I live in Swindon.
Yeah.
And they initially trained me and got me on shows. I was way too young to be on shows, so they put me under a mask. I wrestled as Kano Tango, so I had this orange mask and these orange pleather trousers, and I was a luchador. I used to jump around in flips and hurricane ranas and moonsaults and everything else. I was very acrobatic as a child. I say child because I was 14, 15 years old. But because I was quite acrobatic, they thought I was good enough to be on the shows that young. But obviously, I looked like a child, so they put me under a mask. But yeah, I originally started with 4FW before I later retrained with Brookside School of Wrestling, which is later down the road.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that name because I did see your name quite a lot as Kano, and I was like, I'm going to butcher this, so I'm glad you pronounced it first.
Yeah, the whole gimmick was that I came out, and it's probably like absolutely covered in copyright law and everything else. Britvic are the company that own the Tango drink.
Yeah.
I don't know whether people watching this are familiar with Tango because it's only a UK-based drink, really.
Yeah,
You don't get it anywhere else. But it's just a can of carbonated orange soda, effectively, and it's called Tango. So I was dressed in orange, and I would come out with these cans of Tango, and I would give them to the kids in the audience, and I mean, cheap pop in itself. If you're basically giving kids sugar, of course they're going to cheer, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I would do that, and that would be sort of my gimmick. I came out to the Mucha Lucha theme from the Mucha Lucha cartoon.
Oh, I used to love that.
Yeah, exactly. So that got the audience going and all that, and it worked for the period of time that I did it. But as I continued on in the gym and actually grew up, and well, puberty took its toll on me. Effectively, I was outgrowing that gimmick.
Yeah, it might have started to look silly if you're like a massive guy in there.
The other side of it as well is not so much the size of me, but it's more the fact that when you got the mask on that I had, the mask that I was wearing was covered the eyes and also covered the mouth.
Ah, okay.
You can't really, I mean, physically you can display anguish and you can display pain and in certain ways. You can't really do promos. You can't really convey emotion. You can't, there's a glass ceiling. There's really a hindrance with wearing a mask, especially that kind of mask. So I felt like I'd reached that glass ceiling with the Tango character, and I needed to move out of that into something where I was unmasked and I could be more of a, well, I'm not going to say a carbon copy of Chris Jericho, but someone who could actually show that they did have a personality underneath what was just a mask.
Yeah, so you could show the emotion, couldn't you? Like, obviously, 90% of it's the facial features, and if they're gone, it's just out there.
Absolutely, as well, yeah.
So your first match, how did you find your first match? How do you think it went?
So they protected me because they put me in a 6-man tag. I went in, I did a couple of spots, and then I got eliminated, and then the match carried on without me. And it was in 4FW, and it was, was it 2005, was it? I was still in school, and I left school in 2006. So my first match would have been either 2004 or 2005. And it was a 6-man tag, and I was tagging with El Ligero and oh my god, I forget the other guy. Forgive me for forgetting his name. And then we were against Dave Morales, Dave Mastiff.
Yeah.
Morales was what he used to be known as. And then 2 other people again. I apologise. It was 2005. I can't remember.
Yeah, 70. Yeah.
I did a small sequence of moves. I did some exciting bits and pieces. I got introduced to the audience, and then I got eliminated and moved on. So it was exhilarating, but at the same time I was training with a bunch of those guys that were in that match. So it was just like a training match with an audience. It was just go through these motions. You're not going to do too much. We're not going to allow you to get lost in the ring. You're just going to go out, do your sequences, get some experience in front of an audience so that you can get your timing down, but then get out
before
messing up,
what's happening. Because I was looking through, and the first match I could find of yourself was you versus a gentleman called Lee Class.
That was it. So I left 4FW to go to a company called EPWE, which was Extreme Pro Wrestling Entertainment. And the reason I left to go to EPWE is because Forefront Wrestling at the time had a sort of problem, a bit of a beef, shall we say. There was heat between the two companies, and they were both running in Swindon, so there was like, you stepping on territory, you stepping on toes. So they said to me, basically, if you work for us, you can't work for them. And at the time, I don't know. I don't want to say anything bad about 4FW because they're nice guys, they're nice people. At the time, I felt like I was being held back rather than being allowed to go to other shows. So I started working for EPWE, and instead of a jobber, I ended up main eventing for their company. I started working outside people who would then get me booked on other shows, and I then went from EPWE and then was introduced to Stuart Nat, who booked me for CSF, and then from that, it moved on from there. Whereas maybe that would have happened if I worked for 4FW, but at the time, I was anxious to get out and be seen by as many companies as possible. And when they start saying, if you work for us, you can't work for these, or you can't work for them, that's probably why I decided to leave when I did. But when I started working for EPWE, me and Budge is his nickname. Pure Lee Class was his stage name. And we had, oh my God, we must have wrestled each other. If we wrestled each other 100 times, less than 100 times, I'd be surprised. We wrestled bloody everywhere, and we had sort of, certain sequences. We were so familiar with each other. We had certain sequences that we would do here and there and everywhere. Well, cultivated in a ladder match that was one of my highlights that I from the Cano Tango side of my career. This ladder match that we had, that I was utterly and completely fearless diving off the top of that thing. And nowadays I'm in my 30s now, and I'm a bit like, I feel those bumps when I wake up, but back then I was just made a sponge, so I could just throw myself around the ring and not feel anything when I woke up. But we had this brilliant ladder match that I love. I've still got the footage of that somewhere. I might even be on YouTube somewhere, but God, loved that. So I did wrestle him a lot, but that's not as you described, the first match you could find of me. That wasn't my first match, but it's probably the first full match of my Cano Tango career that's probably made it onto YouTube.
Yeah. Okay, and then you mentioned CSF. It's the first title when I found yourself with the All Nations Light Heavyweight title.
EPWE 0G Championship, which I actually still have. Hang on.
There you go. You won it and then kept it.
It was this. The Extreme Pro Wrestling. EPWE, Extreme Pro Wrestling Entertainment, and it was the 0G Championship. Zero gravity, light heavyweight championship. And then when the company folded, I was like, do you want this back? And they were like, nah. So I kept it.
Longest reigning champion ever.
It's got to be a record, from like 2007 or something to now.
All them defences as well. Literally like Lesnar. And then we were going through, and you started to travel. I noticed in 2009 you started to get out a lot. Since then as well, you were going through to a lot of companies like IPW, FCW, BAWA. So you were getting around a lot. How did that start to affect you, getting out there a lot more?
In terms of affecting me, it didn't really affect me as such, as it was just it was the next inevitable stage. You're supposed to spread your wings and get to as many places as possible, so that really you can learn more. And that's one of the things I wish I'd have. I'm not going to say I needed to have done anything differently, but that's one of the things I probably should have done more, is just shut up and listen more. Because I would get advice from people about my match, and I would thank them. I wouldn't be rude, but I would almost sit there sort of like, well, I got a huge crowd reaction. The crowd went absolutely mad for me. So, maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about. What is he on about?
Yeah.
That's not the right attitude to have. If someone took the time to give me advice, they're obviously trying to make me better, rather than just leaving me to my own devices. And yeah, maybe I did get a really big crowd reaction because I did a fucking moonsault. Do you know what I mean? That doesn't mean you had a good match. That means you did a good spot. That doesn't mean that the match was good. So that was probably one of the things that when I was in my younger days that I should have really paid more attention to the advice that people were giving me, rather than thinking that, oh, the crowd popped for that, or I got a big crowd reaction when I won the match, so the match must have been good. That's not the way to look at it.
Yeah. And then I was looking through, and you had a steel cage match quite early on as well. 2011, I think it was against Alex Steele. Weirdly enough, steel cage versus Alex Steele. That's what I mean.
They showed me that steel cage while it was still being made, and I was like, that's pathetic. That is tiny. I could literally get on the top rope and just like big show my leg over the steel cage and just hop out. It's crap. And when we actually got to the venue, and they were like, "Oh, we've modified the cage a little bit so it's more impressive," and I was like, "Jesus Christ! How the hell am I going to get out of this? It's bloody huge!" And then I started worrying, like, oh, in WWE, when you watch on television, they've got those little gaps, and those little gaps are supposed to be for the camera to be able to, push the lens through so they can get an unobstructed view of the action. But they also use those little gaps for foot positioning, so they can get themselves up the cage. There's none of that in this cage, so your feet are just like slipping off of the cage, like, clinging on like a cat. Definitely, like, push your fingers through these tiny gaps. It's like your entire body weight is holding on these
bleeding.
Fingers. There's blood everywhere, and you're just like, why did I agree to this shit?
Why did I mention that?
Look, match. Looking back, I enjoy those because I haven't done like gimmick matches in quite a few years. Aside from a ladder match, the 6-man ladder match, Money in the Bank kind of ladder match that I've had at Kamikaze Pro, I haven't really done many gimmick matches like that. But I mean, I haven't seen many of them anywhere in the independent scene, to be fair. I maybe they're around, but I haven't heard, oh, there's the big steel cage match or the big ladder match of such and such. I haven't done as many as I'd like to do. A few more,
Yeah, they're very limited in the UK. Look, the ladder match in Kamikaze is pretty much every year, but then like steel cages are probably like seen 2 maybe in the UK. So they're very, very, which is good, to be fair. It's not just throwing steel cages every time you see it.
One thing, and it's probably not very good of me to go on record as criticising WWE, so but one of the things I didn't like is that they use Hell in a Cell as just a pay-per-view.
No,
it's sort of like, okay, well, it's that time of year where the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view is coming around, so you and me are going to have a Hell in a Cell match, and it's like, isn't that Hell in a Cell supposed to be like the absolute pinnacle end of a feud? Like these people cannot be kept apart. They're absolute monsters. They're tearing each other apart. They don't abide by the rules. So we're finally going to have to cage them like animals so that they can tear each other apart. And like the big Hell in a Cell was like this unbelievable spectacle at like the pinnacle of a red hot feud, where like we use this as like the closer. Do you know what I mean? Like this is the definitive end of a feud because it's such a brutal match. Nowadays it's sort of like, oh, it's Hell in a Cell time, we'll just have a Hell in a Cell match, and then there's like 2 on the pay-per-view as well, because there's like a men's one and a women's one, and it's like, are you having a Hell in a Cell match because you hate each other and you need this, or are you having a Hell in a Cell match because it's Hell in a Cell
we need to have it, yeah. It's very spoilt. Yeah, like you got the Hell in a Cell Elimination Chamber was every year at one point, like they had their own event. TLC, just events named after stipulations.
Now, I mean, I think the Elimination Chamber, that's a great idea, because the concept of it is that there's something at the end, whether that means you become the number 1 contender or whether that means you become the champion. There's something for you to go through that kind of hell. But and the Money in the Bank ladder match as well. There's a result that you're going to try and get that, But if you're just you are competing against one other person, just have a match. Do you know what I mean?
Rather than forcing it.
Something special about this feud to justify a Hell in a Cell, rather than just, like I say, it's Hell in a Cell time.
We need this, And then following from that, you started to notice like there's a few names people would notice a lot. So in 2011, you fought Timothy Thatcher.
Yes, over in APW. So I absolutely ravaged every single wrestling promoter in America with emails, just relentless emails, sending over footage, sending over videos, sending over everything I could. Even for people that I can't get email addresses for, I would send them post of my DVD with a letter inside explaining who I am and explaining what I'm looking for, trying to get work in the States. That was my idea, that, you know, getting American eyes on me might be the next step to be able to get the bigger companies to look at me.
Yeah.
And no one in America was interested in me except for one guy called Roland Alexander, who ran All Pro Wrestling, APW, in California. He was the only one that took a chance on me and brought me out, and I competed in their Young Lions Cup tournament. But before the Young Lions Cup tournament, my very first match there was with Timothy Thatcher. And I mean, that guy's, he's just a wrestling machine. He's just fantastic. His ring positioning, his, you know, his movements, his aura about him, his technical prowess, everything about, he's just a brilliant. I don't think you could have a bad match with him. I really don't. He's brilliant. And that was back in 2011 when I worked with him. You know, think of what he is now, you know, and all the WXW stuff he's done, and then the, you know, NXT for a spell, things like that. You know, he's done brilliantly, but he's the kind of person that I used to look at thinking, why haven't they signed him yet? Why isn't he there?
Yeah.
And I'm sure everyone's got like their own list of people in their head that as soon as you think of people who aren't signed but should be, these lists come up in your head. And then you look at the people that are signed, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes you're like, really?
On top of someone, yeah.
Him?
Yeah.
Really? You know, it's just. But he was one of mine on the list, and when I finally heard that he did get signed, I was like, fuck, bloody hell, how long did that take? You know?
Yeah, like I love Thatcher, just like watching his matches. Like the thing I think of mostly is just his grimace on his face and everything he does. Like he just looks disgusted when he hits people, and just like that.
But I mean, that's very much William Regal.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you watch old William Regal matches, and he had that snarl on his face, and he would like lean forward and hunch his shoulders, because William Regal's actually quite a tall man, but he would hunch over to try and intentionally look smaller than the person he was working with. And he, you know, in the way he would like roll his shoulder forward like he was gonna, you know, jab you or whatever. He tried his very best to make it look like a real fight. And Timothy Thatcher, I think, does the very similar.
Yeah.
Because he enjoyed watching Regal's matches and has taken that on board, or whether it's just two great wrestlers that came to the same conclusion and their mannerisms then became similar. I don't know, but yeah, he's brilliant. But I think there is definitely some William Regal influence in what you see in Timothy Thatcher.
Yeah, 100%. And then you mentioned, which I was going to bring up next, the Young Lions tournament, which you reached the final, and then lost to Jeff Cobb, of all people. Yeah. So, you know, it's not a bad person to lose to.
No, honestly, that guy is, I mean, he's a wrestling machine, because he literally went to the Olympics and competed in the Olympics for the United States in wrestling. He knows exactly what he's doing in the ring. He is, like, I've been in the ring with strong guys, you know, big bodybuilder guys who can lift and throw you around. They don't feel the same as Jeff. Jeff feels like he's effortlessly lifting you. It doesn't feel like you have a choice of what.
this is happening.
There was a sequence where I just ran at him and I gave him a crossbody, and he just did a backflip and landed on top of me. So he basically did a moonsault. I jumped at him and he did a moonsault over, and it's just athleticism with that freakish strength. And again, he's not one of those where I thought to myself, you know, why isn't he signed yet? And I recently went to the States with my fiance, and we did a few shows. I did a few shows. I did a few shows out there, and I did. You know, I thought Jeff was in Japan with New Japan at the time, which is why I didn't reach out to him. But he said that he was home in Nevada. I said, "Oh my God, do you want to meet up and have?" So he took us out to the Heart Attack Grill in Las Vegas, and we had a meal out there, and it was disgusting, but it was nice to see him. It's just the food was horrendous. If you ever go to the Heart Attack Grill, don't. That's really the best advice. It's fucking horrible. But yeah, you know, and we were talking to him about it, and this is his story to tell. This isn't my story to tell. But WWE have reached out to him. But, you know, he's in New Japan for the foreseeable. But you know, that's his story to tell, not mine. But it's nice to know that they have at the very least reached out to him and shown and expressed an interest in him, because he deserves it, because he's brilliant.
Yeah, everything about him reads that he could succeed anywhere, like Jeff Cobb. He said he's got charisma. He's a beast of a man. That's all you need. So yeah, you get and then like there's some names like you teamed up with Brian Kendrick as well, just like about the 2012.
Yeah, we had a great match there. In fact, I wasn't even supposed to do that. The guy that was supposed to be in that tag match didn't show up at the show, and I had been in the opening match. And I said to the promoter, I said, if you need someone to jump in, I'm here. And then it got to about halfway through the show, and he was like, yeah, this guy isn't going to show up. Are you all right taking his space? And I was like, fucking yes, I am.
Yeah.
Go for it. You mean I open the show and I close it and I work with Brian Kendrick?
Yeah.
Let me just think about that for a bit.
Yeah. And how was it like working in the ring with Brian Kendrick?
Oh, he's brilliant. I mean, we were tagging, we weren't against
Yeah, yeah.
But he was smooth and you know, he's a really, really chilled, laid back, friendly guy. And I found that with a lot of the Americans. You know, I've worked with a lot with in Hood Slam as well, and just all the guys there. I mean, they're just, whether it's just California, whether the rest of America is not the same, because I will say that, you know, I can't represent what all of America's like when I've only wrestled in California.
Yeah.
But California, I mean, I've wrestled from the bottom all the way up to the top. You know, everywhere I've gone in California, the people are just nice. They're just good people. I don't know whether the sun does something to them, and then the people down in England are a little bit more miserable and a little bit more cliquey because it's a bit more shitty weather. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But honestly, I've made so many good friends over in California that it's a special place for me. It really is. And there's a lot of fantastic workers that have come out of the Bay Area. You know, like Jeff Cobb originally from Hawaii, but he moved to the Bay Area. You know, you've got all the guys in Hood Slam. You've got just all the guys from APW. There's a lot of talent up there that has since moved on to great things, but you can see where they've come. You know, like Powerhouse Hobbs in AEW. He was in APW at the same time. So me and him, you know, we didn't actually have a match together, but we were training together at APW, you know, doing a lot of stuff. So again, there's a lot of talent that's come out of that Bay Area, and I'm just really lucky to have met them when I did, and sort of I've developed in England separate from them, but every now and again we reconvene, and it's nice to see where we've gone.
Yeah, it's the nice thing. It's like a time and a place of meeting someone, and like your perfect time, perfect place kind of moment.
It's one of those things that, for all of its faults, social media does one thing really well, and it does connect people. So, I mean, these people would not have been in my life without Roland Alexander. Roland Alexander would not have been in my life if I hadn't have found them and been able to communicate with them on social media. So it's sort of, and then these people are now in my life, and they're still in my life today because we're still connected on social media. And we, you know, it's just, I know Facebook can be a bit toxic, and Facebook can be a bit, you know, there's sometimes, you know, maybe too much of a good thing. You should limit your usage of social media, and maybe even so much as put a timer on your phone. If you're scrolling on Facebook for more than 5 minutes, get off it. You're just wasting time. You just, you know, go and do more productive things. However, Facebook is really good at making sure you stay connected to people that you've met. And like I said, you know, you were talking about when I went to America in 2011, 2012. 10 years on, these people are still in my life. You know, I had a match in the APW Young Lions Cup tournament with Mikey J. And then when I went to the States in May just gone, you know, this year, I competed with him at Hood Slam. And we've got a picture
incredible,
on Facebook of, you know, us locking up in APW in 2012, and then us locking up in 2022, and it's just this great image of 10 years later. We're both bigger, we're both stronger, we're both better. We've really mastered our craft, and we've come back together for. And it's just nice to see, you know.
No, it's great. Like I said, it's just right time, right place, and like still having them connections all the time is great. And then this is where we start going into like your long reign in heavyweight titles that I noticed you were picking up at this point. So you won a battle royale for NBWA to pick up the heavyweight championship.
I won the NBWA championship 4 times. Defended that, I think. I can't remember how many. I've defended it against Davey Boy Smith Jr.
Yeah.
And Kid Cash.
Yeah.
And oh my god, I'm sure there was another import, and I can't remember so many years.
Yeah, like you were just getting the talent at that point. Like I probably can let me look. See if I can Title reigns.
I mean, after Kid Cash match, we stood backstage and Kid Cash gave me a hug and he said, "Kid, you're absolutely fantastic. You're amazing. I have never been so impressed. Out of all the matches I've had in the UK, hands down, your match with me was the best one I've had. I'm absolutely amazed by what you can do. And I'm going to go back, I'm going to speak to TNA, and I'm going to see if they can take a look at you." And I was over the moon, like
blown,
absolutely just, just like buzzing, like, oh my God, this guy is going to help me get to the next level. And then I never heard from him again. Didn't hear from TNA, didn't hear from him. I tried to chase it. I tried to email him. I tried to email TNA. Try and chase
please.
That, like, you know who I am? Have you heard of this match? I tell you what, I've got the footage. Why don't I just show you the match? Don't worry about waiting for him to say something. Why don't I just show you the match? Nothing. Didn't get anything. But nevertheless, even if nothing came of it, it was still a nice compliment that he gave me. He doesn't owe me a job. He doesn't owe me a living. He doesn't owe me anything. He said that he would forward my name to TNA. Maybe he did. Maybe he did say something to TNA about me, but they weren't interested, and then that was the end of it. So I'm not trying to criticize Kid Cash. He's a decent bloke, and we had a really good match, and he was really good to me, and looked after me in the ring. People were saying all kinds of horrible things about him, that he's got a reputation for stiffing people and being dangerous in the ring. I had a match with him. I thought he was great. I had no problem with him at all. I thought he looked after me. He led me around the ring in some of the sequences, because we talked about some spots, but then we decided to put them in different orders and change things around depending on how the audience were reacting to things. And he was just the ring general. I got nothing bad to say about him. I think he's a really good bloke. So I think it's a bit unfortunate that perhaps he has a bit of a negative impression that people have got who have actually never met him anyway. Whereas I've worked with him, and I think he's a top bloke.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of people do get people get negative attention from the one person, but then it spreads, and it's half the time it's not correct.
Whispers.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not politically correct to say Chinese whispers. I don't know what's.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
I apologise if that offends people, but it's that whisper game that you know of where it slightly changes as it goes on, and maybe that's it. Maybe one person had one bad thing about Kid Cash, and then that has spread through the wrestling community to give him a bad name. But I've got nothing bad to say about him. I had a match with him. He looked after me. He was a decent bloke, friendly guy. So, each to their own, I suppose.
Yeah, and then a big match I saw, I found it a big match, is you got to face Doug Williams.
Yes, I did.
How was that?
I was really nervous beforehand because I imagine if we were going to have a bad match, there is no way people were going to say, "Oh, that was Doug's fault." No one's going to go, "Oh yeah, he wrestled that K Jutler kid. That K Jutler kid's a real pro in the ring. Yeah, Doug Williams looked a bit rusty in that one, didn't he?" It's just not going to happen. It's going to be, "Oh, if Doug Williams can't have a good match with that kid must be fucking awful." So I was really nervous before our match, but it went absolutely fine. He was easy to work with, sound guy, real friendly, a little bit quiet backstage, which probably made me a little more nervous.
Yeah.
If he was a bit more chatty and a bit more forthcoming, then that would have probably calmed me down. But because he was quite a reserved, quite laid back, quiet chap, that probably made me a little more nervous. Like, oh, fucking hell, when you're working yourself up, thinking you're putting all this expectation on yourself, like, I must be good enough. I must do a good job in this match. I must not mess anything up. I've got to be on point with this match. And I just worked myself up. But then we went out, fine. As soon as you go through the curtain, all those nerves go because you're the character you're portraying. You're not your normal. You can't
let it
self.
in, yeah.
As soon as you go through that curtain, you're the machine that you're pretending to be. You're every bit as tough in real as you're pretending to be as a character when you walk through that curtain. There's this adrenaline that kicks in, and you just are the person you're portraying. You are that person, and then when you come backstage, you calm down and it all goes away.
Yeah, like adrenaline dump. Just it's all gone.
Working with him was great, and that was again one of those things that I mentioned earlier about getting all over the place, working with different people, getting experience with different people, and then listening when someone gives you advice. So straight away, by this point, I'd obviously matured and I knew who I needed to speak to. So as soon as I worked with him, I asked him again, what do I need to do? What do I need to progress on? What do I need to improve on? And he gave me some tips and pieces that, I still do to this day. I don't want to give trade secrets away, but I do what he told me,
Yeah, you gonna. It's Doug Williams, isn't it?
Exactly. He's not going to give you shit advice, is he? He knows what he's talking about.
And then following up, for some reason, you kept winning the MBWA title in Royal Rumbles, basically Battle Royals. You won 2 of them to win the title.
Yeah, I guess I'm just really good at throwing people over the top.
Yeah.
That was my gimmick in MBWA. I was the Rumble winner.
And you had a chance to fight Joel Redmond at that point as well. Straight after that, I noticed as well. Yeah,
that was great. Yeah, me and Joel, we never really spoke. And I think the only time I ever really saw Joel was when I was really early in my career, and I was a little bit more of a, I don't know how to word this. I was never intentionally an asshole to anyone, but like I said to you earlier about how I would think that I had a good match just because I got a good pop from the audience.
Yeah.
So I was a little less receptive when people would give me advice. I think that is around the kind of time when I first met Joel. So I think Joel got a bit of a reputation. What am I saying? A bit of an impression of me that I was a bit of a twat. And then when we worked together, I remember when I was training at Brookside School of Wrestling, he went to Darren Walsh, who was one of the trainers, and Joel said to Darren about how, his attitude is much improved and he's better in the ring. That's probably all down to having trained at Brookside School. And Darren and I were working a show for Brian Dixon down in Minehead, I think it was. It was one of the Butlins shows. And that was when Darren said to me, he said, yeah, Joel has mentioned you, saying that he recently had a match with you. And he says that, your attitude's much improved and you're better in the ring and he just had nice things to say about me, but he said it to my trainer. So I knew that was like honest and authentic from him. So that was nice, that basically someone who probably had kind of a bad impression of me from my early days got a better impression of me after having worked with me. So that was almost like a bridge mended.
Yeah.
Me and Joel never had a problem with each other, but I think I may have given the impression of being a bit of a know-it-all.
Yeah, like young,
like you do when you're at the beginning of your career, when you're like, I can do a moonsault. That means I should be world champion, And then you grow up within the wrestling industry and you mature and you become a more sensible person. And it's nice that me and him got to work with each other at that point so that his impression of me got a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's nice that obviously your opinions can change, and it's good that there are some opinions. Well, you said with Kid Gash, some opinions stick, and then obviously his opinion you changed, so it can happen. And then you went back. Well, I don't know if you went back. I think you might have been there a few times. The CSV, and you won the All Nations Heavyweight title, and you seem to have that for the long haul at that point. So yeah, you had it like twice for 610 days combined.
Yes, I did. Yeah. I worked for CSF for a long time. I haven't worked for CSF lately. Stuart Knapp is the owner of the company, and there was a small sort of, I'm going to say backyard. That's not right, because the people that he booked, the talent he books is top tier talent. There's a company called Immortal Wrestling that started, and they ran a show kind of near one of Stuart's venues, and Stuart basically said to everyone, if you work for me, you're not allowed to work for them.
Oh, it was like,
it's the same kind of thing with 4FW. It was the same sort of thing that kind of got my back up, and I was like, I will, unless you give me a contract and you give me money and unless you pay me what I would have earned from that show, I am going to do that show, because I don't. Maybe it's the wrong way of looking at it. Maybe I should have been more considerate of what Stuart was saying. But in my head, I was sort of like, I'm not contracted to anyone. And if they're offering me quite a large sum of money, I won't say, but, they're offering me a decent amount of money. Pay me that and I won't go.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'll go and work for whoever I want, because you can't tell me who I can and can't work for. And I went and worked for them, and that's why that sort of unfortunately severed ties with CSF, which is a shame, because I've had loads of great matches in CSF, and I've had a lot of great times there, and I don't dislike Stuart, and I don't dislike anybody in the locker room over there. But again, it's one of those. I don't know how to word this without sounding like a bit of a twat, but I guess it's. I should be able to control my own career rather than allowing someone to tell me what I am allowed to do.
Yeah.
Unless I'm contracted, unless I have signed something to say that I will adhere to these particular rules, I don't think anybody should be able to tell me where I can and can't work. And again, on the flip side of things, he's talking about. I imagine he would not have had a problem with me working for Immortal Wrestling at all if Immortal Wrestling just ran somewhere else.
Yeah.
If Immortal Wrestling ran a show in bloody Wales, Stuart Nat wouldn't have had a problem with it at all. But it was just that, I can't remember where it was now, but it was near one of the venues that was his sort of territory, where he considered it to be, that's too close, it shouldn't be happening. I don't want any of my talent on those shows. But again, by virtue, my talent, they're not your talent, they're talent that you use.
Yeah.
They're not your. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But again, I'm saying things that probably sound a little negative towards Stuart Nat, which is not fair, because he is a good promoter. He's been running CSF for a long time, and CSF is a well-run machine. They put on great shows. The guys there are all really friendly and decent people. So even though me and Stuart Nat don't work professionally with each other anymore, he's still a decent bloke. He's still a kind guy. I don't have a problem. I mean, we're still friends on Facebook. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're still connected on Facebook. It's not like there's an animosity there. It's just he thinks if I'm working for a show that's too close, he doesn't want me on his shows. So it's fine.
Yeah, it's
But
just
that's where the CSF thing eventually came to an end, just because I was sort of. Well, that's that story anyway.
Yeah, no, it's just I'm not a fan of an ultimatum either, so I'm instantly like I'm going against this, it's because I just don't like ultimatums. Yeah.
Well, yeah, again, it's one of those things. It happened. Maybe I wasn't. I don't know. I'm trying to take ownership of something that wasn't really my decision. I can't do that, and I said I bloody can,
and you did.
So that was that. You know what
I mean? And then, which I didn't know this about yourself, that you went to wrestle and you had a few matches in Dragon Gate as well.
Yeah. I went over there in Dragon Gate. Yeah, it was SEMA that organised that. I didn't organise it through the actual Dragon Gate person himself. It was him that managed to get me that. I went over there, had a bunch of matches over there in Japan. Had Kobe beef while I was over there, which is bloody delicious, I might add. And that was when I went over there and they said, you're technically proficient, everything you did was good, we really enjoyed it, but we want you to do more high flying before you come back. We want to see you doing more acrobatics, we want more of a higher flying gymnastic style. And because I used to do Kano Tango, that's something that's within my wheelhouse. I can do it. But obviously, since the days of Kano Tango, I had put on quite a lot more muscle, a lot bigger than that 15-year-old child that used to do Hurricane Ranas. I was now a
bit of a beast of a man, yeah.
So after I came back from Japan, I started training at a gymnastics school in Swindon, and it was a Swindon School of Gymnastics, or Swindon Gymnastics, which way, SSG, whatever the acronym was. I started training there and picking up a few bits and pieces, and then you started seeing, as it transitioned from coming back from Japan, starting to train in gymnastics, people started seeing a change in my wrestling, and they started seeing every now and again, Jesus Christ, he just did a running shooting star press, or he would, I'd vault over someone and do a backwards handspring and end up at the other side of the ring, or something like that. I did twice in matches. I did a shooting star press off the top rope, and both times I obviously didn't land it. I made sure that they rolled out the way because I couldn't control how I was going to land. But that was one of my, ever since I saw Jushin Thunder Liger do a shooting star press off the top rope, I was like, I must do that. I must. So I plucked up all my courage and I did it twice in a match. I did it once in a match with Jack Stars, and I did it another time with a match with Eddie Ryan. And then the third time I did it was in a match with Kamikaze, and it was my debut match with Kamikaze, which is probably a fitting name with this story. I went up to the top rope, and I got up, but I didn't really rotate quite enough. And I sort of, for lack of a better expression, I sort of Brock Lesnar'd it. And the idea was that I were to miss it, land, get up, super kick, and that would be the end of the match. But I didn't really get up. I sort of just hit the mat, and I was like, okay, I'm going to check my fingers. I'm going to check my toes. I'm going to move my neck. Yeah, everything's okay. All right. Then I got up, and the crowd were dead because they thought they'd just seen me kill myself.
Yeah, they were dead because you're dead.
Properly Brock Lesnar, the shooting star press, and the entire room went, oh, like that. So it wasn't like a pop. It was like I sucked all the air out of that room in once, and I was like, oh, this is fucking, I can't do that. So I've stopped that entirely now. There's no more top rope shooting star presses ever again. It's just done. Never again. A lot of other acrobatic things that have transferred from my gymnastics training have made it into my wrestling, and I like to sort of, what's the expression? Sort of subvert expectations. People look at me and think, he's a relatively big bloke. He's not going to be, that was a surprise. Yeah. I like to throw the occasional thing in, but I'm not luchadoring my way around the ring. It's something that comes out every now and again on a special occasion.
Big surprise, but yeah, it's when I first saw you do it, I didn't expect it at all. So you're doing the right thing, just surprising. But yeah, you segued into where I was going to go next, which was the good old Kamikaze, where I saw a lot of your matches, and you became like a proper Kamikaze favourite quite quickly, even though everyone hates that you're from Swindon.
It's bizarre, isn't it? Every time Laurie gets in the ring and he says, from Swindon, they all boo the shit out of it. And he goes for the rest of my introduction and says my name, and they all cheer. It's like, I can't. It's cheap to live here. It's cheap. Okay, why do we live here?
Yeah, look.
Although, to be fair, Birmingham, people in glass houses throw stones. Swindon, you might think is a shithole, but Birmingham is not the fucking Garden of Eden, is it? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, you got to visit Stetchford recently. That was the when you fought Chantal,
BMW was going to be on bricks.
Yeah, like I'd never been around that area of Stetchford, and like I kept walking, and it's got to more and more of a hole, and it was just a social club in the corner. I was like, okay. But yeah, even that match is kind of skimming forward to the last match I saw of you. He didn't even mention Swindon, and they still booed that you were from Swindon somehow.
They just know. They just know.
But yeah, so you became like a proper fan favourite at Kamikaze, and you were pretty much like a gatekeeper at Kamikaze for like the big stars coming in. They would fight Jutler.
That is true. They did actually give me a lot of high-profile matches. And I don't know whether gatekeeper is the right expression, because that implies that I was hoarding those opportunities for myself and not allowing them to other people. That's probably forgive me for correcting you, but
that's fair enough.
With that. I was awarded them as a reward for having worked hard, and that's why I got a lot of those opportunities. Obviously, not every import that came in worked with me, but I did get probably more than my fair share of imports. Although I will also caveat that with I also put over a lot of imports.
It was all
I also led down on the floor for 3 for a lot of imports.
And it was the big guys you were fighting as well, people like Keith Lee and Jonah Rock, you know, people, you're the big guy, but then they're coming in. It's like...
And Shigeru Irie as well.
Shigeru Irie, like when I think it was Keith Lee bealed you, and I couldn't believe it.
Neither could I. I've always seen that, honestly. I'm going to give away a bit of a trade secret now, and I hope the wrestling community will forgive me, but whenever I've watched Keith Lee do that beal from one corner to the other, you watch him do it to people like Ricochet and stuff like that. All right, well, they're obviously acrobatic people. They obviously give themselves a big push and a big jump, and they push themselves off of Keith's chest so that they can catapult as far as possible. I gave that man nothing. I did not push off his chest. I did not jump. He pushed me back into the corner. We went forward, and before I knew it, I was the other side of the ring.
Flying.
I have no idea how he did it, but I left the ground, blacked out, and then woke up on the other side of the ring. I did not jump at all. I did not give him anything on that. That was entirely his brute strength. He launched me across that ring.
Like, I'm worried if you did jump. If you would have jumped, you'd probably been out of the ring.
Well, that's yeah, I think about where I would have been. Yeah.
And then eventually you did. You picked up the Kamikaze title after defeating Clint, I believe. I can't remember if it was Clint.
Yes, it was. Yeah, I won the ladder match.
Bank on it.
One contender, and then because I didn't know that was going to happen until I got to the show, and then they pulled me aside and said, you know, for all the work you've done and all the effort you've put in, we're gonna put that on you. And I was just, you know, when you feel like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like vindication.
Yeah.
And you've worked so hard, but I was never working in order to be, you know, the guy in Kamikaze. This is probably not the right thing to say, but I'm going to be completely honest. I was just simply happy to be involved. There's all this great talent that comes through Kamikaze, and I thought, wow, I'm one of them. I'm one of the people that they think is good enough to be here. I feel so privileged to be working for these guys with the quality of the talent that's on these shows. My name is with these people. I feel like, wow, I'm considered this level now, which is just, you know, amazing. And then when they put the title on me, I was like, shit, I've reached the top of this pack of people. Everyone here, all of this talent, they consider me to be that level.
Yeah, the top tier, yeah.
I never considered myself that, because I always thought, in a stupid kind of way, I always felt a little bit like an imposter. I always felt like I had managed to like luck my way into the Kamikaze like locker room, and I was like, "What? One day they're going to realize I don't belong here, but I'm just going to hold on as long as I can." But then they made me the champion, and I was like, "Oh my god, I actually belong here. I actually am, or at least in their eyes, good enough to be in the ring with people like Keith Lee and so on. You know, they consider me to be that caliber, that level of talent, and it felt like, yeah, vindication. Like, oh, I'm not a pretender. I'm not lucky to be here. I am good enough to be here, and I deserve to be here. And it's like, Laurie, I've got a lot of time and a lot of respect for Laurie, because he goes back from the NBWA days, and he's been campaigning for me to work at Kamikaze for a long time. And James gave in and gave me an opportunity when Laurie was twisting his ear. And you know, Laurie saw something in me that not everyone did. I can't even explain how much respect I have for Laurie. He's the only person in the wrestling industry who is coming to my very, very small, intimate wedding on the 7th of October. I've got like a very, very small guest list. You know, me and my fiance, we've got a small guest list each, where we've only got 25 guests each, you know, 50 in total. So we've got like 35 of those are filled up by like obligatory family members that have to come. And then you've got this tiny little section for all your closest friends, you know. And Laurie and his girlfriend are coming to my wedding just because he's one of my absolute favourite people in the world of wrestling. If I had a bigger wedding, I would make more space for more people. But if there has to be just one, then it has to be him, because I almost owe him a debt of gratitude for what he's done for my wrestling career, and seeing the talent in me that a lot of other people didn't see.
No, that's great. And as I said, you've been at Kamikaze ever since. Like one of my favourite rivalries was your title rivalry with Clint. Like Scummy Clint at the time of just being the ultimate heel. Like Clint probably is one of my favourite wrestlers as well. Just the no nonsense, just like an absolute heel at Kamikaze.
And I don't want to ruin his allure that people, you know, the way people perceive him. He is a sweetheart.
Yeah, he's a nice guy.
He's a nice man. He's a decent, good, nice person. You know, he always makes the time to say hi to everyone, and he's a friendly, laughing, happy he's just a decent bloke, and and it's nice to be able to have worked with him. His style is very, very different from me, so I never thought that the two of us would ever end up interacting, but we interacted so much over the title that I got to work with someone who I don't think any other company would think, oh, those two, that would make a good match. Let's book those two. Whereas Kamikaze, again, is one of those opportunities where you get this flow of such different talent all the time that it mixes in matches, and you get these matches that you just wouldn't get anywhere else. And me and Clint are a perfect example of that, because I don't think we would have ever been booked against each other in any other promotion. So I got to work with him because of Kamikaze.
Yeah, and like I said, it's probably one of my favourite rivalries in Kamikaze. Just it went on, and it was just he was so heely against you, it was unbelievable. Like, they built him as an absolute brick, basically. But yeah, in genuinely real life, Clint's so nice. It's like the alter ego in it. It's weird. And then obviously recently, well, not recently, it's probably been about 4 years or so, Kamikaze started doing the live shows as well, the dojo shows. And then you've been facing a lot of like the up and coming dojo wrestlers, like showing them the way, kind of.
James has, what I like about James and what I like about his vision is that he really genuinely cares about his trainees. You got to think Chantel Jordan was one of the trainees there, and look where she is now. You know, Maurice, look where he is now. You know what I mean? Like, they actually care about building up their talent from their training academy to become main stars on the UK independent scene. And he has this care and this attention that he puts into the training. And after the lockdown, because obviously it was like 2 years, I didn't touch a wrestling ring. So even though I've been wrestling for a long time, I still said to myself, you've got to get back into training first before you can be comfortable getting back in a wrestling ring. And I went to, of all the places I could have gone all over the country, I went to Kamikaze's training, and I had James run me through all the same drills as the trainees. I didn't want special treatment. I didn't want anything different. All the same cardio drills, everything. All the same positioning drills, all of that stuff, just to knock that ring rust off. But watching him train the people there, he has such an eye, and he genuinely cares about trying to help hide everybody's weaknesses and really expose everybody's like strengths. And he does it with everyone. And obviously Chantel Jordan and the career she's now starting to build, a lot of that, so much of that is because James put effort into her and saw her for the talent she is and helped her. And he's trying to do that with everybody else that's coming through the training dojo. So when he's asking me, can you come down and work with these young trainees, because you'll be able to help them through a match in front of a live audience. Trainee versus trainee should never really happen, right?
Yeah.
It's too much of a high risk situation. You know, you always want someone more experienced in there to be able to guide things and control things. So he's put, again, a different kind of trust. You know, before it was the trust of being the head of the company in terms of the world champion. Now it's a different kind of trust where he's like, I need you to be able to look after these kids and guide them at their beginning stages. And it's almost, in many ways, it's exactly the same kind of vindication where, wow, he considers me good enough to do this very important role. It's being with Kamikaze's pretty special.
Yeah, like James, what I like about James, he rewards people for dedication as well. Like he will show you talent. 'Cause like when I was training there for a while, he just threw me in a battle royale out of nowhere because of my dedication. Like, because it's just, if you're showing up all the time, he knows you want to be there, and he'll throw you in and show you how it works. And like how he works with because obviously anyone that's not watched the main show, he's just returned. And absolutely obliterated Chantal's brother. So he's going to work from Chantal to Brandon. Like, I thought he was going to come back as a nice guy, but clearly not. But yeah, with Chantal as well. Like I refereed her first match, and I don't know if you remember Dave Scott Preston.
Yes, I remember him.
Yeah, it was their first match, and it was kind of like the amount of trust James put in Chantel for that matchup, obviously his first match, and then just making sure I made sure everything went well as well. And she's obviously just flew off. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we normally ring to this point. Obviously, something small happened for 2 years called COVID, that kind of stopped the whole world. What were you doing during that time?
What was I doing during that time? I wasn't running stand-up comedy shows. I wasn't wrestling. I wasn't in the gym. I wasn't personal training. I wasn't traveling. I wasn't doing all my stuff in Germany. I couldn't go over to Germany. I couldn't. Longest reigning German heavyweight wrestling champion for Maximum Wrestling.
Yeah.
Because of COVID. 3 years as champion, and I won it in 2019. And the end of October 2018, I won that title, and then I had it for all of 2019. And then I have a feeling I was supposed to have lost it in 2020, but fuck that.
It's your title now.
Held on to that, and now record breaking in terms of Maximum Wrestling's records.
So, yeah, like that happened with. That happened with a lot of champions, don't it? Like Sean Custom just won the Kamikaze title, and then it went COVID. Everyone's got the longest reigning titles in history. But you don't mention COVID.
So during COVID, I couldn't make any money from stand-up comedy, couldn't make any money from wrestling, couldn't make any money from personal training. So I retrained as a HGV driver. So I got my lorry license.
Oh, God.
Because I thought, right, everyone likes to think that pro wrestlers are millionaires. Well, unless you're signed to a contract, it's very hard to get that kind of money. So I needed to make money somehow. So I decided that with this country, I'm not going to get political. Brexit is what it is. But there is no argument that because of Brexit, we had a massive shortage of HGV drivers. We needed food, and we needed medicine, and we needed fuel, and we needed all of these things to be delivered. And there wasn't enough people to do it. There was this huge backlog at Dover because of the checks at Dover and the checks at Calais. There's all these problems that were mounting up. And then, if you remember in COVID, remember when the shelves were empty and there was no food on the shelves? There was no fucking toilet roll because everyone was out for themselves and they didn't think of each other.
Yeah.
All of that stuff compounded the issue even more, that there was this huge supply issue and huge supply, the supply chain was breaking. So I qualified as that, and I did my part to try and basically help in any way I could, delivering things. I've delivered all manner of different bits and pieces up and down the country, just while the lockdown was going on. And then as the lockdown eased, shows came back, I could run stand-up comedy events, I could go back to personal training, I could do everything that I needed to do. I've kept that license, and every now and again, I'll add another lorry driving shift in here and there if I need it. I haven't really been doing much of it, to be honest, but I don't want to lose that license because it's still useful, and I can still contribute in some way to the country when we do have problems that we've had. Like, for example, it didn't really hit mainstream media. They emphasized it a little bit. It was sort of like one of those stories you hear at like the end of the news. It wasn't like a main feature. But there was a big supply shortage of like antibiotics and other medicines and other syringes. So for like blood tests, you could take your blood, but they didn't have the vials that were needed to be able to keep the blood to then send off to the laboratory. So blood tests and all of that were backlogged because they didn't have all the little vials that they needed to be able to do all the blood tests. It's a supply issue. The lorries aren't moving fast enough. They're not getting the things from one end of the country to the other, from Calais to Dover do you know what I mean? So, I've moved all manner of bits and pieces through COVID. And then just after COVID, as things eased off, I thought, I'm going to keep this license in case something else goes tits up and there's some other catastrophe.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we normally ask you at this point as well. So are you really into music, films?
Really into films, music. In terms of music, I'm really old school music. When that Elvis film came out recently in the cinema, me and my dad, that was like, aside from wrestling, me and my dad's thing, we were big Elvis Presley fans. and we watched, his '68 comeback tour. We had that on a VHS tape. One of his '70s shows in Vegas, one of his super shows, his Hawaii show, all of those kinds of the mega shows that he did. And one of his Hawaii shows, I think it was the big Aloha from Hawaii Elvis show in the '70s. It was 1.86 billion people worldwide watched that. And that is still a record held today. And you think about every pay-per-view of like major wrestling event, major UFC event, major boxing event, major concert, all these amazing, huge, like super shows that have gone on, none of them have beaten that Elvis record from the '70s. And he was a megastar. So I'm a huge Elvis fan. And then when that film came out, I was like, oh, please be good, please be good, please be good. Don't ruin it. Don't ruin his legacy. Don't ruin it. And I watched it and I thought, that kid, what's his name? Austin something.
Butler?
Who played Elvis in that film.
Is it Butler? Austin Butler? I can't remember his...
I think you're right. I think that's his name, Austin Butler. If he doesn't get an Oscar for that performance, then there is no justice in the film industry, because he did a bloody amazing job. He portrayed Elvis perfectly. Absolute amazing job that kid did. He honestly, if he didn't get an Oscar for that, then the film industry's bloody more fixed than wrestling.
Yeah.
That was amazing. So yeah, in terms of films, it would be things like Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, all the main Spielberg shows. All the main Spielberg films, the classics. Probably my all-time favourite is Silence of the Lambs, weirdly.
Oh, that's a good one,
yeah.
A bit like...
Silence of the Lambs, probably one of the best films ever made. Terminator, I love the Terminator films. So I'm more of an action thriller kind of film buff. And then when it comes to music, there's a lot of older stuff, a lot of the '80s stuff, a lot of the '70s stuff, and specifically like the '50s, '60s Elvis kind of stuff as well. So probably not what people expect. Every now and again there's the occasional AC/DC song that finds its way into the shuffle. So I do like a bit of rock here and there as well. But yeah, it's much more of the older stuff for me. I play piano. I don't know whether you've ever seen any of the videos that I've put on Instagram.
Oh, you haven't? No, yeah.
I play piano. I've got the piano in the background, which you would be able to see if my laundry wasn't drying in the background as well. Right? But yeah, I play piano, so some of that kind of more classical side of things. I'm not a huge classical music fan, and I definitely don't recommend listening to classical music while you're driving at night, because you will fall asleep. But yeah, I have probably more of an appreciation for the older side of music. I listen to music nowadays on the radio, and I'm like, I feel like a 90-year-old man. Like, this isn't music. Noise. It's just noise. All this bloody electric techno crap that if you can make music on a laptop, it's not music. Right?
Yeah.
It's just not. You have to use an instrument to make music. Okay.
And then you mentioned, which I didn't know much about this, your stand-up comedy as well. I didn't know much about this at all.
Yeah, the first time I stood up on a stand-up comedy stage was the 14th of October 2018. It was a 5-minute open mic set at a show in Bristol, and it went really, really well. Most people, when they do their first show, stink the place up, but surprisingly, I think probably because I've wrestled for so many years, I've performed live so much that I just didn't get that nervous, and I just felt comfortable on stage, and I could riff with the audience, have a laugh with the audience if they shouted something out, things like that. So that confidence that wrestling has built in me for all these years probably has catapulted me. I don't want this to sound arrogant, because this sounds really like self-congratulatory when I say it, but I've kind of hit the ground running with comedy in the sense that I've started my own comedy events in Cricklade and in Swindon. And we sell out the show every time. We do 5-6 shows in Cricklade a year, and we do 12 shows, once a month, 12 shows in Swindon. And we're selling out everything we do. People keep coming back. I've won a first year. I've got the little picture up here. Actually, it's called the Funhouse Comedy Gong Award. Yeah. I won that for one of my sets. So yeah, it's fun. Making people laugh is fun. There's just no other way. Yeah. It's a nice atmosphere. It's a nice feeling. It's a nice kind of thing to do. And I like just like performing, I like entertaining. And I will say this, there's been certain times where I've got off on stage, got paid, looked at my pay packet, and I've gone, that's more money than I would have made from wrestling, and I didn't have to take a single bump.
And then finally, what we normally do to round off the interview is we kind of do a segment of a hypothetical. So it's who would you like to wrestle in the future, and then it's more of who would you wrestle if you could, live or like dead or retired.
So, based on my style of wrestling, my answers would probably be a little bit strange, or at least not strange, but answers that you probably wouldn't expect. I would really like to wrestle again. I would really like to wrestle Jeff Cobb again. Whether that be in a grand, New Japan stage somewhere, or whether that be, in a 50-seater room, somewhere. It doesn't have to be a special event, but he is a brilliant talent, and I would really like to work with him again. And then in terms of someone who I could, but obviously won't happen, is the long since retired Kurt Angle. He was probably my all-time favorite wrestler. I thought his what I liked about him, and people don't fully appreciate, is it's very difficult to do comedy, to be funny, to be self-derogatory, and to basically to make fun of yourself, and yet still be taken deadly seriously when you wrestle. You can so easily pigeonhole yourself in or typecast yourself as a comedy act, and you lose all credibility in the ring. Whereas because of his incredible ability, he could be funny and yet could be also world champion. So he's probably my number one pick as probably the best wrestler ever, in my opinion. Everyone will have a different opinion, everyone will think differently, but in my opinion, I think Kurt Angle's probably the best ever.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, the man won a gold medal with a broken freaking neck, so, if he doesn't mention it. But yeah, so Kurt Angle's definitely a good choice as one of the best wrestlers ever. But yeah, so that's the end. If there's anything you want to plug, your Twitter handle's been on the screen for the whole show. But any other socials?
You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram as well, which is not the same as Twitter. My Twitter is @Jutler, but my Instagram is more based toward my stand-up comedy side of things, and that's my real name. So it'd be @mkolweg. Kolweg is KOHLWEG. And the next thing I'd like to plug, I won't be wrestling much this next month or two because I'm getting married on the 7th of October. But on Friday, the 28th of October, in the Cricklade Club, which is not surprisingly in Cricklade, that's our next big stand-up comedy event. 130-seater building, full stage and lighting set up. We got 5 professional comedians are going to be on the show. I'm also doing a small set myself, and we've got just a brilliant venue that has 2 bars. So on the 2 breaks that we have, everyone can get a drink when they need it. It's just one of those setups that is just, the Cricklade Club is such a nice place. Most people come in before the show and they have a meal in the restaurant. Then they come through to the venue afterwards, get themselves a drink, get themselves set up, and then the show starts at 8 o'clock. So yeah, that's Friday the 28th of October. The show will start at 8 p.m. Tickets are still available on my website, which is kolweg.co.uk. Kolweg, again, is spelled KOHLWEG.
Excellent. But yeah, so thank you for coming on. You're one of the ones I wanted to get on straight away, and you said yes, so that was always good. And everyone, as usual, like, subscribe, and we will see you again soon. Goodbye.